Hey, what's up, folks? Welcome back to Keep It Wausome podcast, the podcast that brings you the most interesting, quirky, and fascinating people of Central Wisconsin. I'm BC coming at you. First, want to give a little shout out to our sponsors, Scotty's Ale House and Eatery. Appreciate your sponsorship. And Campbell Haynes Menswear. I'm wearing one of your shirts right now, so shout out to you guys. And then one more shout out to our new sponsor this month, Verve Salon. Love what they're doing over there. So all of those local businesses, be sure to go check them out. They're great. They're great businesses and they support our local community. Hey, I got a really awesome podcast for you today. Joining me today is Jerome Segura III. He is an economist and a mushroom grower. I'm going to have him tell you about that in a little more detail, but this is our guest today. So welcome to the show, Jerome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I guess I think it'd be really interesting just to start with your background because you have kind of a very interesting background. You've got this kind of academic economics background, and then now you're kind of in the thick of it with this mushroom business. So tell me, kind of walk me through all that.
Yeah, so I'm originally from the New Orleans area. Grew up in South Louisiana, so I was about, I think, 23. Undergrad in 2006. It was a degree in general business. Modern day academics call it, business administration, I believe.
Sure.
And my concentration was economics. I didn't know what to do. I was really at, I guess, a crossroads like most people are when they finish their undergrad. But for me personally, I still had a lot of questions that I didn't see my undergraduate background really answering. And so some of my professors talked me into pursuing a master. Well, actually, it was a PhD at the time. And so I applied to some PhD programs in economics. I accepted the position at University of Missouri in Columbia, where I originally was doing the PhD, but was at a regional teaching school, much like what we have throughout much of central Wisconsin. For me, there was no mathematics emphasis in any of the curriculum. And economics at a graduate level is mathematically intensive. I found myself unprepared. So I took Calculus 1 and Calculus 2 while I was there. I was able to sneak through the program and basically got a master's degree in a year and a half while catching up in mathematics, all for free. The state of Missouri paid for my tuition, most of my fees. And I got a stipend to be a teaching assistant where we broke up 500 students into little sections, and I led discussions among the students. When I finished at Missouri, I was kind of off track. So my alma mater, Southeastern Louisiana University, called me back to come in as an adjunct instructor. So I took the position for 6 months before I re-entered into a PhD program in economics, this time at Oklahoma State. I ultimately finished that degree in 2013. I'm a urban and regional. I worked under Dan Rickman, who's actually originally from the Wausome area. I think his brother still works at the Wausonian mill.
Oh, nice.
And Dan Rickman's among the top 10 regional economists in the country, 5 national or globally. And Oklahoma State ranks among the top programs for urban and regional economics. And so by coincidence, after a short stint working my way from, I guess I was an adjunct professor to visiting assistant professor at Oklahoma City University, a private liberal arts school. My position here at University of Wisconsin, Stevens Point.
Yeah.
So this would have been January of 2015. The job offer came through. And that's when those really big budget cuts were actually happening at the university.
Before we go too far into that, I want to know a little bit about what drew you to economics and business, and like, how did that change as you went through academia?
Yeah, so originally I was just had a lot of questions that economics helped me place. Although I didn't have very much mathematics background, I was always intrigued by numbers, patterns, equations, and helped me place mathematical constraints on ideas that I just couldn't do alone. And the more I pursued it, the more revealing the subject matter was to me, not only from a subject matter perspective, but more generally from a life perspective. It just helped me see the world through a different prism. And I like the way the world, and so I kept pursuing that conversation.
Cool. I'm going to come back to that later, but yeah, I'll let you continue So then you accepted the position at UWSP.
Yeah, so it was a dual appointment. I was an assistant professor of economics,
Hmm.
really teaching sports economics and urban and regional economics. And the other part was to be the coordinator for the Central Wisconsin Economic Research Bureau, a bureau that's been in, I guess, well, at least with the universities for almost like 30 years. So this is a well-established bureau.
Yeah.
Under the expectation that the chief economist was retiring, and I would transition from coordinator to chief economist.
And that was Randy Cray.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he retired 6 months after my arrival, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe it had been a year. I forget. It was probably a year. And I was chief economist. I mean, I was 35 years old, chief economist, assistant professor of urban and regional economics. And for all intents and purposes, I'd achieved all of my life goals. I mean, I've got my master's degree from a well-respected institution. I got my PhD from a well-respected institution. I got an assistant professor position, and I was chief economist. I didn't really have anything else I was striving to do. I mean, I was publishing papers at, well, I guess one paper per year from my point of graduation. The first 2 years, I didn't really publish that much. It really ramped up in the last 3 years as kind of you start establishing a pipeline of papers. But yeah, I mean, I basically achieved everything I wanted. I didn't have any more goals left in that area.
What does that feel like?
Well, I guess that's why I'm doing what I'm doing now, right? I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. This seems like a good option for right now.
Because I think that's where when I met you, I believe you were the chief economist at the time. So I think that was before. I think that was before you kind of branched off. And I've always been, one of the things I liked about you is I feel like you always had a nuanced approach. Like I didn't feel like you come from a particular school of thought, and that you probably incorporate several schools and sort of take the Bruce Lee model of like taking what works. So at least that's the impression I got. Like I never got a strong bias from you one way or another. You feel that's true?
I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
I think the first thing we spoke towards would have been the Foxconn proposal. If I'm not mistaken.
It might be, yeah.
I don't remember for sure. It's all on my CV, right? It's like 14 pages now. I moved here with a 2 or 3 page resume, and now it's like 14 or 15 pages. The amount of work I've done.
Nice.
And those 3 years with the university, so it was great.
Cool. So tell me about branching out and leaving the university and how all of that came about, and what your thought process was.
I mean, the budget cuts were tough.
Yeah.
The budget cuts really shifted the focus of the institution away from what we had discussed during the job interview process in January, relative to what were the expectations once I arrived. At least from my own perspectives, they were different. I thought I was hired to be more of a research economist, where I was actually taking students in, training them to do research, taking them to conference to present their research. But yeah, somewhere along the way, there became an emphasis on revenue generation. And someone who's not necessarily a business economist, but someone who's much more of a social scientist, I have several moral dilemmas with that process. On the other hand, being the entrepreneur, I have a bigger problem with it. Because if I wanted to generate revenues, I'd be doing that for myself. I'm not going to do that through an occupation to pay my salary. So that for me it was really a difficult decision, actually.
Yeah.
But again, having that difference between my skill set and what my employer was seeking, I just told them I wouldn't do it anymore. The bureau specifically, I mean, I told them I would no longer be their chief economist. And so I knew the consequences of that. I mean, I knew the ramifications. I mean, it was very clear to me that I was hired to do both. And if I didn't do the bureau, then my other position would be terminated. And so, yeah, I mean, I jumped into that knowing the consequences.
And that's what happened then?
Yeah, it set off. I mean, so I mean, it definitely sends off a series of meetings that are no longer really in my control, and I just have to be present.
So what allowed you to take, I know this is something I've been studying a lot lately about entrepreneurs and what helps them leave, because that's a tough decision to leave. Like, you get the steady paycheck, you've got a family, but you have this pull to do something entrepreneurial for yourself. But it's hard to like leave that, it's a lot of people have a hard time making that leap. What do you think it was for you? Was there a moment where you're like, you know what, screw it, I'm doing this? Or do you feel like it was more like a slow burn and you sort of just let it happen? Or how would you explain that?
It was really two parts. So my wife, Kara,
Yeah.
Kara Adams, she's an entrepreneur herself.
Yeah, I should point out that's how you and I became connected, is because I met her and did a story on her new business. Not that new anymore, I guess. It's been a few years, huh?
It has.
But I should get Agora. Did I pronounce that
That's
right?
right.
Agora.
I think it's Agra.
Agora. Yeah, Agora Marketplace, which is sell in Stevens Point, sells exclusively Wisconsin made good. Is that accurate description?
As close as you can get, I would imagine.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Some random things or not, but yeah, pretty much
Mostly.
everything has a local maker. You can track it down to the person.
That's super cool. Yeah. And then she mentioned you, and I was like, oh, I could always use another good economics source, especially since, as you mentioned, Randy Cray was or had been close to retiring at that point. Maybe he had already. He's always someone I could call up and be like, hey, dude, what's up with this? And we'd always have a good talk. So I appreciated you coming on the scene and having that person, as a sort of a replacement that I can still get that info from. But that's how we became connected. So I'm sorry, go on.
Oh, what were we talking? Oh, about my wife. Yeah, so she was starting that business.
Mm-hmm.
So that I was jealous. I was very jealous of her. Honestly, passionately jealous of the fact that she was being entrepreneurial and I was stuck in an academic job. Couple that with the two kids. So, I mean, the bureau and the assistant professor with the research, I was working 60, sometimes 70 hours a week. I had two kids.
Yeah.
One was under 2. The other was, what was that? 5. I didn't like the life I was living anymore. And so those two combined, like I jumped for a stay-at-home dad. I was purely a stay-at-home dad for like 6 months. I thought it would be a lot more work than it was. Don't get me wrong. I just had someone who was a great infant who slept pretty much all day. Mm-hmm. And so I found myself bored. I had a lot of free time, looking for a hobby. We were eating like $20 worth of mushrooms a week. And I was like, hey, I can grow mushrooms. Made a drunk purchase on Amazon one night. Seeds, which was a complete disaster. Don't buy Amazon mushroom seeds. Mushrooms don't grow from seeds. So I quit. I mean, those things grow. They were portobello mushrooms. They grow on manure. I was foraging chicken poop, microwaving it to sanitize. I was doing really dumb things. So I threw all that out, and I used my academic background to actually do legitimate academic research into ways people grow mushrooms. And I stumbled across wood-loving mushrooms, which is exclusively what we grow now. We're in central Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. Furniture companies, so there's a lot of sawdust that's locally sourced.
There you go.
And so we grow a lot of wood-loving mushrooms. It started with oysters, and then we've kind of expanded from there. It was pure luck.
Yeah, when did you make the leap from I want to like grow mushrooms for myself to, hey, you know what, this could be a business?
Yeah, so initially we were just posting pictures on Facebook of the mushrooms we were growing. Mm-hmm. I had a little greenhouse down here, basically, like really silly, but filter on it, just basically grew mushrooms. And they were just a few blocks at a time, like maybe 4 of these behind me. Mm-hmm. Enough to feed us. A cluster of mushrooms is a pound. So I mean, we could eat quite a bit of mushrooms in a week. But those pictures started spurring some interest, like, do you sell those? They're so beautiful, all of these different things. And so I think sometime in March of 2019, maybe, I decided to, I don't know, do a CSA, and people signed up. It was mainly friends, acquaintances, people that I worked with professionally when I was with the university, who started buying mushrooms from me. So I delivered mushrooms to them on a weekly basis. And I used that money to then grow the business and expand it.
Mhm.
The more I grew, the more I sell. And it got
Nice.
to the point where I've basically consumed the finished side of our basement as an incubator. All of these bags have filters on them. So there's nothing going out. They're filters.
Oh,
They just exchange air. And then we have an old coal room that I finished with some fake walls. I vapor barriers, sealed it off with some negative pressure. I sucked the air right out of the house. And we grow mushrooms out of that space. It's about
wow.
by 11 feet. So it's a nice amount of space.
So they kind of start in these bags and then they go over to the other side when they're growing a certain
Yeah.
point, or how does that work?
Yeah. So first we just have sawdust with bran, basically lime, pasteurize it. So I use pickling lime. I inoculate it with some grains that have the culture growing on it. They sit in this space between 2 and 4 weeks. Then I kind of fold the bags up, take them into the fruiting chamber and let them stay in there for 3 to 4 weeks. And normally I collect 2 different flushes off of them. So yeah, it's a fun little hobby that turned into a little operation. And the kids earn a little bit of money.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Were you surprised that it turned into the moneymaker that it did?
I don't know if it's a money maker. It's probably
No?
still a hobby.
Really?
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of stuff that I learned when I was doing academics, and especially the community outreach, is that you can't really force feed people
Yeah.
information, no matter how important it may be and no matter how obvious it may be. If they're not ready to hear that, then they're not going to see it. And so mushrooms, I mean, it really taught me a lot. You can put mushrooms in a lot of different things and they'll only grow in environments that are conducive to their growth. And so instead of really trying to grow mushrooms, I had to really shift my focus to cultivating an environment that was ripe for them to grow. And so through that process, right, like once again, like my lens changed. I was no longer trying to teach people economics, but rather I was trying to cultivate a space that might have been ripe for mushrooms to grow.
Yeah. You ever heard of the theory of emergence?
Never.
It's basically the same thing you just said, but you can think about that in life too. Like instead of focusing on like a really narrow specific goal, you kind of create the environment that from which success will come out of. You might not know what that success is, but it's like planting good soil. It's instead of just like putting a plant in the ground and dumping a bunch of fertilizer on it, it's like cultivating good soil such that the result is that good plants grow. And it sounds like mushrooms kind of taught you that lesson.
It's again, it's amazing. Yeah, life, right? It's amazing.
Yeah.
And the things that you do, where you can end up. Being from the New Orleans, I never thought I'd be in central Wisconsin. Today I was working in a short sleeve shirt because I'm hot and it's like 4 degrees outside. So go figure.
Yeah. So one of the things I wanted to come back to you on that we were talking about, you were saying you had these questions in economics and that you were seeking answers to them. And did you feel like starting this business? I'm curious what that impact had on you and your view of economics versus coming from an academic background on it, and like whether that's informed anything or changed any viewpoints of yours. Because one thing I come back to a lot, I've been really kind of obsessed with behavioral economics lately, reading like Daniel Kahneman and God, I'm drawing a blank on the other guy, the nudge guy. You know what I'm talking about? Richard Thaler. He's the other guy. And
Sure.
it's just sort of this idea that for a long time economics had they always sort of assumed a rational actor, like the people would always act in their best interest. But of course, people started observing, well, wait a minute, they often don't. Like 401ks is a great example. Like it's almost always beneficial to participate in your 401k. It's going to be economically beneficial for you in the long run, especially if there's a match. But even if there isn't, yet most people wouldn't unless you nudged them into it. So if you had opt out instead of opt in, then you could get them to participate. So those are just some ideas I've been thinking about. I wonder, like, in your foray into this mushroom business, if your views on economics changed, or if you had some new insights in that direction.
Honestly, whenever I am doing mushrooms, I'm doing mushrooms. I
Mhm.
don't, there's really much overlap. Um, though there are some pricing decisions, right? So, I do employ
Mhm.
some of the stuff I would have learned in my undergraduate career. The notions between wholesale pricing for CSA members and for chefs relative to the retail pricing when we're at farmer markets. Appreciating that there's some average price that actually makes the operation sustainable. Um,
Mhm.
Always able to target that, but you're trying to target that on average. Um, but no, I can't imagine. I'm sure I'm going to regret saying this,
Mhm.
but now at least, I can't imagine that growing mushrooms necessarily shifted me cognitively from what I was thinking before, as far
Mhm.
as to urban and regional economic growth. I think what we've seen over the course of the last year has kind of really reinforced a lot of my sentiment around certain topics, as opposed to maybe say weakened it. It's really
Interesting.
been an explosive year, from the pandemic to
Mhm.
um, I don't even know what the appropriate term is for the unrest that we saw over the summer months in response to George Floyd and others.
Mhm.
And then the craziness that we saw around the
January 6th.
to the year, right? Like it's just been
Yeah.
a really chaotic year where I think a lot of people are evidently hurt
Mhm.
for lots of different reasons. And yeah, like I say, I don't know if anything's really shifted in that regard. I think
Gotcha.
she has really reinforced it. And the mushroom farm
Mhm.
of responding to that. I thought we'd have a slowdown in consumption, but the pandemic sent people shopping local, especially for food.
Mhm.
For us, people were eating mushrooms seemingly more than they were before the pandemic.
I was gonna ask you about that. I was curious what impact COVID might have had on it. And I wondered if maybe more people were gravitating towards mushrooms, especially buying local mushrooms from a local grower. I feel like there's been more sentiment to do that. Um, yeah. So did you feel like the delivery methods were trickier? I think when I know you guys go to the farmers market, I don't know if that's, how much you sell there versus if it's like more marketing or if it's both, or I don't really know what that is for you, but I'm curious how that impacted your business in that way.
So we've done, um, yeah. So the big thing for us has been the in-person vending that was occurring through Agro. My wife's maker market downtown Stevens Point. Um, Once she closed in March, we didn't have access to those customers.
Oh yeah.
So I think that was about 2 months, maybe longer, but about that same time was when the summer market started ramping up. And I think the winter market moved outdoors in March. And so there was a huge flock of people. It was crazy. People were showing up with respirators on, 95 masks. People were really scared March of last year. This summer market was a little different. I think people were much more comfortable. It didn't seem like everybody was wearing a mask. It doesn't seem like there was much fear, and there were a lot of people. My wife does most of that. She's the salesperson. She's really the face of the business. She does most of the direct to consumer sales, as well as building relationships with the chefs. I'm still that stay at home dad. I'm managing these two boys of ours, 4 and 8. Um, Both here all the time now that one of them is e-learning, the 8-year-old in second grade's e-learning. But
Mhm.
so, the market, the mushroom cells haven't, the volume hasn't really changed much. What kind of did happen though is like, some of the things that we really count on, like the local food fair, that's not happening.
Mhm.
We miss out on those potential customers. I think Wausau has a maker market we attended last year. Again,
Mhm.
we missed that.
Yep.
Um, so those did hurt. But at the same time, our business has been here for almost 2 years. So now we're starting to get some brand recognition. We're starting to send customers these fruiting blocks really across the country. Um,
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that part of it because when did you start selling the growing kits, and how is that? Did you get some feedback to say, hey, I would like to grow these on my own?
yeah, that was some of the sentiment, right? So customers coming in were really intrigued by mushrooms. It seems like they're a cool thing, or at least they were a cool thing when we were getting started. People had lots of questions. People were talking about how mushrooms are going to save the world with micro remediation and other things. Um, I mean, I have some plasticky mycelium that I keep. I mean, it seems like a really cool thing to have. So I maintain the culture.
Nice.
Haven't tried it yet. I've kind of been busy. But yeah, I mean, people started talking about it. So we started offering it, and they were really great gifts during the holidays for those people who are really hard to give gifts. People said specifically for dads are hard to give gifts because they have enough socks.
I know.
This is something that they're kind of cool with, right?
Well, funny enough, for me, it was my sister who really wanted one of the mushroom kits. So yeah, I think I bought one or two of them from you guys when I was at the Makers Market, at Red Eye, or not Red Eye, at Whitewater. So
Yep.
I think that was like Christmas 2019. So like leading into 2020, I believe.
I think you're right.
I recall correctly. And yeah, she loved it. She was very happy to get it. But yeah, I think great for holiday gifts, and awesome just for people who want to do some of these things on their own. Which I have to say, like, you know, I haven't dove into growing mushrooms, but like, you know, a lot of these kind of homemade things, I think people sort of assume they're kind of hard, and they're really not that hard. Like, I mean, probably my most recent one is like learning to make pancakes from scratch. And I'm like, that's it. That's all there is to it. Like, this is super easy, you know? And like, you know, it's the same thing with like bread or pizza or kombucha was really simple. You know, a lot of it's just like following the steps, as long as you know what to do. And then you don't have all the extra junk in it too. You know, you control what goes in it. And man, I could probably eat pancakes every day for like 50 cents because it's so inexpensive to make. You know, a little maple syrup maybe makes it a little more expensive, but anyway, but yeah, like I think stuff like that is super cool. And you know, I love that you kind of turn this into a business too. And you know, I think a lot of people still, you know, want to be able to buy it.
Yeah, it's you know, it's satisfying a demand. It's keeping me busy. And it's healthy. So I don't see any reason to stop. And,
Yeah.
you know, once the kids are both in school and I'm free between the hours of 8 and 3, I have a lot more free time, and the potential to expand this and actually employ people, right, becomes a real feasible opportunity at that stage of my life. And so I look forward to that maybe in 2 years, see where we are, maybe expand again, you know?
Yeah. Growing and scaling a business is super interesting.
Yeah, this has been a lot of fun. Again, I study the equations, right? I did a lot of math, a lot of arbitrary mathematics, deriving equations, understanding the way things work from different schools of thought. And now to be sitting here, yeah, it's something. So I'm in the process of building a laminar flow hood. I currently work inside of a 120 quart. I don't know what these things are called. Is it Sterlite, the plastic container with lids that people store stuff in. I have 2 4-inch holes cut on one side, and I work inside of it. I do all my sterile mycological work inside of a still air box. But we've grown to a point where it's just time to get a laminar flow hood. So I've got everything. And so yeah, it's always like that slow growth process of what you need most. It's kind of like maintaining a home, I guess. I mean, you're always searching for what needs the most amount of work.
Well, that's kind of what I've done with the podcast. I mean, I've slowly grown it from, you know, as I've gained sponsors and have some income coming in for it. I started like upgrading some of the equipment, I got the ring light that I bought was, part of me was like, God, is this like super vain that I'm buying this ring light, you know, like, what am I think of some kind of Instagram model or something? But I'll tell you the quality difference, like just the lighting. I mean, I have it on now, and, you know, you can see the background's kind of dark and I'm a little bit lit up, and, you know, I think it makes a difference. And probably the next thing is my mic setup. You know, I have like a Blue Yeti mic, and it's good. It does well, especially since I learned how to, you know, get the settings right on it. But probably at some point I'll upgrade to like a 2 mic system with an interface that'll be good for music recording too. So I'll have a dual purpose. But yeah, no, you're right. You just like you slowly start adding on and building and growing, and you know, the scalability is a very interesting thing too. Do you feel like the mushroom business is pretty scalable? I know at some point, you know, you have space concerns and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I could slash my costs significantly if I moved away from using wood pellets, the hardwood fuel pellets people use to burn in their pellet burning stoves, to bulk sawdust. I mean, I could get a truckload of sawdust for the price of what I'm paying now. But that's because I avoid a sterilization process. It's really an atmospheric pasteurization process. Basically, water, and you keep that steam around these blocks for like 24 hours to bring the internal temperatures up to where it's pasteurized. I don't want to do that here. So I use wood pellets. When they're extruded, they're under so much pressure, they get really hot, and they're basically pasteurized in the bags. So I can use those. I add a little bit of pickling lime to the water to really pasteurize anything else that may be in there, specifically with the wheat bran that I put in the bags. It's really conducive to contamination. Trichoderma mold, it's the green stuff that grows on top of your potting soil in your home, maybe.
Gotcha.
It's my number one contaminant. It's number one contaminant in mushroom growing. It's just a decomposer. So are mushrooms. A really good environment. The spores are there. They're really competing for one another's space. Yeah.
Interesting.
It's okay.
So did this spark any interest in like mushroom foraging? Have you ever gotten into that, or have you been really solely focused on growing it?
No, foraging. I don't have enough confidence in myself to pick mushrooms.
I don't either.
There's no way. Absolutely not.
I search for them. I look for them. I try to identify them, but I'm terrified of ever eating. Like, the funny thing is the ones I feel like are the most recognizable around here are also the most rare. Like if I saw a morel, for sure, I'd for sure know what it was, but I've never seen one, not once.
Right.
I have some friends that claim they know good spots, and of course they're not telling me, so maybe they're not that good friends. But but the ones that are really common also have They also have cognates that look. I guess cognate's not the right word, but they have twin mushrooms that are like poisonous. So it's like, yeah, you see a lot of them, but you don't know if it's the common one or if it's the edible one or if it's the poisonous one. But I find it interesting, at least, kind of exploring what the different mushrooms are in our area. I think that's really interesting to me. But yeah, I'm on the same page as you with like actually eating any of them. It scares the daylights out of me. Because you can get really sick,
I think so. I was reading about some of the bad things that can happen to you when you eat bad mushrooms. There's just no way I'm going to risk that.
Yeah, for sure.
Organ failure. Some of the painfulness that people experience. One of the worst ways to die, actually.
Yeah, forget that. So I kind of wanted to ask you about some current economic issues. One thing I think is really interesting is, so I'm an investor, so I follow the stock market. I stick to index funds. That's what I preach till the day I die. I think why pay people to mismanage your money? You can almost always do better. The data shows you almost always do better in an index fund. But I find it interesting to watch the growth and how it's been completely different from economic reality. I wonder if you could address that and kind of talk about why that is, because we've seen like the stock market, it took a huge dip in March, and then it was down for a while, and then it just kind of went on a tear ever since. Meanwhile, obviously people are still struggling.
Those are some big ideas.
Yeah.
So the crash that we saw in March was pretty well explained, right? There was panic.
Yep.
A lot of uncertainty. We didn't really have really clear information coming out of China about what the virus looked like and what the impacts were going to be. We were just seeing entire cities shut down, large impromptu hospitals being built, and large quantities of dead bodies. So when it rapidly started spreading around the world, I think people started initially kind of dismissing it, but finally started to realize this may not be such a big hoax. And I remember the last time I took our two boys to eat, we normally would spend Saturday mornings at the Cozy Kitchen while my wife was at the farmer's market before I would open her store Agra and run the register until noon. And that Saturday, it was 9 o'clock and we were the only people in Cozy Kitchen, which confused me. And so there was so much uncertainty about what the death rate was going to look like, the contagion rate, how long we were going to be shut down. Supply chains were incredibly disrupted. And so I think that stock price was really warranted. I think it made sense at the time.
For sure.
But what was it? Maybe April, we started getting a lot better information from the CDC. because I think the first cases started spreading out west, maybe was it January, February when they started realizing the cases were spreading. And so I think as that information started to become more and more, I don't know, what is the word, right? I guess once we started to realize what things were actually going to look like, and we were no longer really bound by our fears, I think the market started to recover. You had, I guess, the federal government, specifically the central bank, started responding. Once again, started printing money. I think they've effectively doubled the money supply, right? So from
that's
current,
an issue I'd love to pull out with you too, because my understanding is there's been more. I think you said it. I think you said it right in that statement that they doubled the money supply. In fact, from what I heard, there was, I don't know if this, I believe this is true, that there was as much money printed in 2020 as there were in circulation up to that point.
That's absolutely correct.
Yeah.
And you go back to the Great Recession of 2008, over that 2, maybe 3 year period, where the Fed was pursuing QE 1, 2, and 3, effectively doubled the money supply then as well.
Okay.
So you can think of where we were in 08, you can think of where we were in 2012, and then a doubling again. And so once you have that increase in the supply of money, I think asset prices naturally trend up. And I think that's what we've been seeing with the stock market, particularly as bond rates have essentially went to zero, if they weren't already at zero, like further to zero. I mean, they haven't yet in the US. Other countries have suffered with that challenge.
I've heard of that.
Fortunately, we've been able to avoid that. Interest rates aren't negative, and that behavioral economic stuff doesn't so much enter into play. People don't remember the negative prices. In fact, negative prices sometimes make people freak out. I mean, for example, if I were maybe setting up a chocolate stand at university and I was selling chocolates, people may be willing to buy them from me. If I were to give them away, it might be a little sketchy, but people might still take them. If I started paying people to take chocolates from me, they're probably going to scream, right?
Yeah, right.
And so negative interest rates tend to do the same thing. People get really confused. And so we've been lucky to avoid that. But again, with interest rates low, people aren't really holding bonds, and instead they've got to invest in something, commodities, but people don't like deliveries. I mean, 50 pounds of gold's $1 million. That's a lot of gold. Where are you going to store that?
Yeah.
$1 million worth of silver is even more, right? Like that's those quantities of silver.
Bitcoin, I guess.
What's that?
Bitcoin, I guess.
Yeah, right. I mean, but that is true, right? I mean, either options or cryptocurrency. And so we've seen those things really soar. And at times I haven't run any correlations, but there seems to be an inverse relationship between the stock market and Bitcoin. When Bitcoin soars, the stock market kind of takes a dip that day. Moving their money between these two assets that are just trending up.
Interesting. What did you think about the GameStop fiasco?
It's like what Bitcoin did a few years ago, whenever it first shot up before it crashed. Kind of same idea. I don't know if the news stories, the headlines we were hearing were really a fair representation of what was actually happening. When you look at who was actually trading the stock, it wasn't the retail investor. And so it seems like that story we were getting from the news outlets was kind of misrepresenting things.
You think so? I wondered about that. I know I started following that Wall Street Bets forum, and I think there were, I think there were a lot of retail investors involved, but I'm sure there were people, getting in on it from outside of that group too. I thought it was pretty interesting to follow, and I kind of like the idea. I kind of like the idea of these kind of vulture short sellers, kind of getting it thrown back at them. And let's be honest, short sellers tend to be manipulators. Like if you're going to short sell a stock, these guys will go on, MSNBC or Fox Business News or something. They'd be like, oh yeah, that stock's going to tank, so it basically becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I kind of like the idea of these, these kind of rogue investors, and, maybe it wasn't all rogue investors, who knows who's really involved in it, but I like this idea of them coming along and kind of sticking it to, kind of market manipulating against the market manipulators. I kind of get a kick out of that. In all fairness, though, it's not like GameStop was this thriving company that had, great prospects in the future, and some short seller decided to like mess with them. I mean, it's probably a pretty good position to be a short seller in, I would imagine. If people aren't buying games in stores anymore, you can buy them right on your console. And even if they don't, there's like Amazon or, Walmart.com or whatever to buy them. So yeah, it probably wasn't, like I said, it probably wasn't a thriving stock to begin with, but it is kind of funny. It's kind of funny to like sit back and watch.
Yeah, it motivated me to start day trading.
Did it really?
Yeah. Maybe in 2015, my wife and I started putting some money in an Ally Invest account. We just bought stock and held it.
Mm-hmm.
And we did it foolishly, just kind of aimlessly buying stock. My wife was smart. She bought a bunch of Tesla.
Cool.
Split a whole bunch of times. So she's got a lot more there. I bought what I thought were good stocks like GE, IBM, and I was throwing it in at their peaks. So I've kind of been reading about day trading. Instead of holding stocks, started day trading, started reading more about it. Been reading a lot about it. I tried a few times and I failed miserably. Setting my stop losses like 2.5%. And I was needlessly trading stock, or when a stock would get up to like 3%, I'd panic and I'd sell it. So been a lot more reading. And so now I've kind of picked up like long swing trading, swing like every 2 weeks. Only work a couple days a week at it, work Monday mornings, Friday mornings, and let the rest of it go. Let the market kind of trend up, put losses in appropriate places, but just do it different, see how it goes.
Gotcha.
If nothing else, it's fun.
Yeah.
Those stocks where I can buy like 2 or 3 of them and really stick it to the man.
Nice. Yeah, I'm sticking with my index funds. They seem to do well for me over the long term. It's been good with me so far.
I'm simply playing with free money, right?
Yeah.
A couple of lucky stocks, and so we just maybe $1,000, $2,000 I'm playing with.
Gotcha. I have a little bit. I started doing a little bit on Robinhood. I think it's kind of interesting. I just been buying like I'll just buy like a really small amount of like, I bought Netflix and Apple. I think those are maybe Amazon. I don't know. They've been kind of crappy lately though, so we'll see. We'll see. But yeah, I think the vast majority of my money is in index funds, and I just think that's the data is pretty clear. That's the safest bet. And they outperform the professionals,
Right. They do. It's hard to beat the market.
It's hard to beat the market. Just play the market. The market goes
That's
up
right.
eventually.
Eventually.
Has little dips here and there, but yeah, I think that's really interesting. I'm super excited about about the mushroom business and how it's growing, and that's really cool.
Yeah, it's wholesome. It's a lot easier to sell than it was to try to sell economics in the region. So yeah, this is a good thing for now.
So yeah, I think is there anything you would want to leave people with? Any economic wisdom? Any mushroom wisdom?
Yeah, I think focus on cultivating that space. What did you say that was the theory
of emergence?
Theory of emergence. I've got to read.
I've had a hard time like looking it up, but my friend Pete, who is a bike mechanic and a sculptor, told me about it a long time ago. I'm not sure where he got it from, but I think it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of wisdom there. Really cultivating that space in which you want to live, as opposed to really trying to force what you want.
I agree.
The field of dreams, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Build it and they will come. Build the environment and it'll grow. So where can people find if they want to buy your mushrooms or check them out? What's the best way for people to do that? Sure.
So I actively manage the Facebook. It's at Segura Mushrooms. So SEGURA Mushrooms. Agra here in Stevens Point has a website. It's an online shop. You place orders there. Alternatively, you can find us at the Winter Stevens Point Farmer Market, which is behind Fleet Farm here in Stevens Point. And then we'll be at the Summer Market, which is on the square.
Nice.
And you can find oftentimes our mushrooms on the menu at Chef C's restaurants, both is it Chef's Kitchen now, as well as Father Fat's, I think. So oftentimes you can find us there as well. If you don't want to cook them, he'll cook them for you.
Very nice. I haven't actually haven't been to either. Well, no, I've been to Father Fat's. I take it back. I used to love Christian's Bistro. I was kind of bummed to hear that he closed that down, but he had a lot going on. So
Yeah, we definitely enjoyed his Cajun food.
mhm.
There for a while, it was Chef's Creole Kitchen.
Oh
And
yeah,
being from Louisiana, there was a lot of good flavor there.
yeah,
It's nice
yeah.
to
I
get that
know.
here in central Wisconsin.
Yeah, I interviewed this couple once who was there when I was doing a story on them, and they said they would drive from like an hour away to come to Christian's Bistro, and it was really interesting. The wife flew to New York every week to work, so she worked like in New York City, and they lived kind of out in the middle of nowhere in Wisconsin. And she's like, yeah, these guys keep up with all the best restaurants we go to in New York, like they were really into this place. Like they would actually they would fly some of their like chefs out to New York for like training and stuff, and they were just like super fans of this place. But yeah, I always loved the food there. So that's awesome. Yeah, interesting that you brought up the online thing too, because that's one thing I noticed the pandemic has done is it's forced like a lot of local businesses to really up their web game, or even in a lot of cases start their web game. I think that's pretty interesting.
Forced my wife to start her web store entirely. I mean, the mushroom farm was added as a part of it, but yeah, this pandemic forced her to go online. I mean, it was a panic there for a bit. It was good for her to get it up and running because it basically allowed her to reopen.
Has it been pretty successful?
I think she's paying bills.
That's
So in the
good.
pandemic, right? I mean, that's making it. That's living
Yeah,
the dream right now.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you know, she's relocating right down the road, so
Oh
she's
yeah, I
moving
saw
into the
that.
space between Radio Kiosk and Polito's Pizza. Um, and she has, I guess, a partner now, a managing partner.
Oh,
Carrie's awesome.
cool.
So yeah, I mean, I would imagine it's paying bills, hiring people. So it's doing everything I think a business is supposed to do by year 2 or year 3.
Awesome. Well, I'll make sure I'll put some links to both your wife's business and yours in the description down below, especially for our YouTube audience, and hopefully get some insight in for our audio podcast as well. But hey, man, it's been great having you on. This was really fun. I'm glad we got to talk some economics and some mushrooms. It's a good time
Yeah,
today.
yeah. Thanks so much for having me. I really have enjoyed this.
Yeah. Well, I always end it by saying keep it awesome to my guests. So keep it awesome, Jerome.
Take care.
All right.